episode 85. Hello, I'm Annie.
And I'm Elise.
Hello, Elise.
Hi.
So today we are going to be talking about a lovely small place not quite an hour away from Toulouse.
Not even, really, yeah.
That I haven't been to, so now you're going to make me go yet another place.
Well, that's what I do, isn't it?
That's right.
Really?
But it sounds lovely, and it's called Carla-Bayle. So we'll talk about that. But first of all, I want to know what you've been up to.
Well, let's see. First of all, I went back to the States for a while and visited New York, which
Nice.
is my state of origin, as they would say, right?
Like salmon, you spawn back.
I swear, exactly. Not quite, but I didn't actually swim up the Hudson River, although I did go to see it. But it was really a lot of fun, and I did post a bunch of photos on my Facebook page for anybody who's interested in seeing some of them, because visiting Manhattan after having not been back for a couple of years was really, really a gas. And there are two areas, of course, that have been changed a lot. One I had not seen in years, I must admit, and that is, of course, the area around Times Square, which I have not seen since it was basically taken over and turned into a fairly flamboyant Disney kind of atmosphere. But it was so much fun to see all the new architecture and the colors, and I actually had a great time traveling, zipping around, basically, and then went down to the lower part of Manhattan, where they are gentrifying what was basically a large industrial area, that part of which is called the meatpacking area. And that's where the new Whitney Museum of American Art is. And that was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Yeah. The museum is a very, very contemporary looking from the outside. It's really nothing special, except that it was built specifically for the location, which means that they really took into consideration, and I thank these architects. I don't remember who they are, but I really do thank them, because not only did they make a wonderful space that's a big open space for contemporary art, but they designed it so that almost on every single level you have a view and a terrace which takes you outside, so you get a 360-degree view of Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, the Hudson River, the Statue of Liberty, and it was a gorgeous day. So it was really wonderful. And in Manhattan, they have copied, and I must say it is true that they have copied the idea that began in France. They call it la voie verte, la coulée verte, which is where they took an old train track that led out of the Gare de Lyon, and they turned it into a beautiful landscaped walkway that's above, so that you see the rooftops and some beautiful buildings. And it's about 1.5 miles, 2 miles long. And so they've done the same thing in Lower Manhattan. And there's this, it's called the High Line. And it actually, you can start at the Whitney Museum, go up this elevator or stairs, and you can walk all the way up to the 30s from there.
Wow.
So it was fun.
That sounds like fun.
It was really a lot of fun. It was seeing some of the best things that there are to see in Manhattan. And of course, even though I am from there, I haven't lived there in a long time. So I was a real tourist.
That's good.
And it's fun. It's fun being a tourist, you know?
Yeah.
When you have friends who live there all the time, they go, why would you want to go see that? You know, it's like, we live here all the time. We don't need to see that. I said, yeah. And then they can say, oh, what a great idea. We never do this. And I'm like, duh. You know.
You got to do this.
You got to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Otherwise you got stuff right under your nose. Well, kind of me and Carla-Bayle. It's right under my nose.
It's right under your nose. Oh, there are other things that we'll talk about another one day. The one that we talked about with the lake that's right under your nose that you don't want to go to. We'll talk
I
about
have
that.
been to that one many times.
Yeah, when you were a kid. Right?
Yes.
We know about that. But anyway, that was really, really a lot of fun.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
It's and of course it's nice to go when the weather's nice.
Yeah.
New York in the winter is a bit hairy.
It's much, it's a lot much. Yeah.
So that's what I did. And then being back here and being back basically home, this past weekend, something that you and I both know about, and that's really a huge success. It was started actually under the Jacques Lang, the Minister of Culture.
The French Minister of
Culture. The French Minister of Culture, which I guess means that it's just about 30 years old.
Yeah, it's old.
Yeah.
I was going to say 25, but
I think so, yeah. And that is the Weekend of Patrimoine.
Yeah. Patrimoine.
Which is basically Heritage Week.
Yeah, patrimoine is one of those strange words that it's hard to define, to translate.
Yeah.
It's patrimony, but it doesn't mean
anything.
Guys only.
No, because this past weekend on Saturday, I did a nice little walk that was really basically dedicated to the idea of the Weekend de Patrimoine, and I had a very nice Irish couple who had joined the walk. And they said that exists also in Ireland. And so he asked me what the word would be. And I said, well, I know in the UK they talk about national heritage.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the way you would have to translate it.
Yeah, I like that.
That sounds better. I mean, it's hard to translate the word. It basically, what we're talking about, of course, is that it's about all of the structures, monuments, houses, castles, churches, whatever, that are part of the heritage of architecture and history of France.
Yeah. But the thing that's kind of confusing is that in French, you can also ask a person about their patrimoine.
Which means what?
Which means what they own in the family.
Okay.
Like, you know, vous avez un patrimoine or something. And usually it's rich people that talk like that.
So we're talking capital in that case.
Exactly.
Right?
You're talking about stuff that you're likely to inherit someday.
Right.
You know. Maybe
well, I guess that, there's a sense of that, I guess, in the
heritage,
the heritage, right?
But in that case, it would be inheritance,
right?
Anyway, it's
right, but it's really a wonderful idea, and of course, it is done in other countries as well.
In a lot of Europe,
but it was started here, and so basically, and it's really great. But people sometimes don't think about paying attention to it to plan ahead. One weekend, third weekend of September every year, all historical monuments, all public administrative buildings, or mostly all of them, are open to the public. And of course, the only limitation is staffing, because they have to have people there to staff these places. And it's interesting to know that besides public places, the place I visited for the first time this past Sunday, like many others, which was absolutely magnificent, is privately owned. Mm-hmm. And if it's privately owned, the people, of course, have the choice of whether to open it to the public or not.
Right.
And the public things aren't free. And that if it's privately owned, they might charge some money to go in for the weekend. But it's really a chance to see all kinds of things that otherwise you would never get to see.
Right.
So
there's this little castle in the next village.
The one right coming in.
Yes, and that one opens for patrimoine.
Oh, they do open
once
for patrimoine.
in a while, not every time.
Because people live in it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's what happened with us. We decided that we would leave the city itself because I didn't feel like going very far. And there is a town that's basically now considered a suburb, of course, on the west side called Pibrac.
Yes.
And that has a huge, absolutely gorgeous Renaissance castle.
Yeah.
Really castle. I mean, it's amazing. It's a palace with the grounds.
Beautiful, yeah.
It's got about, we met the seigneur.
Wow.
Oh, well, of course, he doesn't wear armor anymore. He was wearing a Lacoste shirt, actually, instead of pants. But he was Mr. de Pibrac de Fort.
Monsieur de Pibrac de Fort.
Yes.
Ravi, cher ami.
And his family has owned the castle since the 1520s.
Oh, goodness. Wow.
And it's a magnificent Renaissance castle. Absolutely splendid.
Yeah, and that one's not open to the public.
No, it's not. And of course, we could only go into 2 reception rooms inside, but the grounds and the outside are open to the public until January. He said that he and his, I assume, whole family, although I imagine he's at the age where he probably has grandchildren or at least grown adult children. He said they live there 8 months of the year. And I didn't dare ask where he goes for the rest of the time, probably along the Côte d'Azur or someplace really nice and warm, I thought, take me away with you, please, But the grounds are gorgeous. There's a magnificent hunting lodge in the back.
Wow.
It's about 50 acres.
Gee, that's big.
Yeah, it's huge. And it was splendid. It was absolutely gorgeous. So that was really fun.
Yeah.
Especially since, like in a lot of cases with things like that, it is true that when castles and chateaux are privately owned and they open them like that for a special weekend, the owner is often there. And he was there indeed to greet people.
Okay, what's the name of this actress? She lives in Pibroch, an American actress. Bergen?
Candice Bergen?
Candice Bergen.
She lives in Pibroch?
She does.
She lives in Pibroch?
She lives in Pibroch. I know people who live in Pibroch.
How do you know that?
Because I know people who live in Pibroch who've seen her many times. It's her. It's
one of her homes.
Well, yes. Yes.
Because she obviously
probably has
lives
many.
she lives in New York most of the time, actually.
Yeah.
She has a place in Pibroch.
She has a place in Pibroch.
Oh,
yes.
well, what do you know?
Pibroch also has a nice basilica.
Yes, it's a basilica. And in fact, that's, I think I'm going to do a visit to Pibroch before the winter sets in, before the castle grounds close, because the basilica is actually a very interesting place. It's based on a saint, someone who was declared a saint in the beginning of the 20th century.
Was it Saint Geneviève?
Saint Geneviève, yeah.
Yeah. See, I know a few things.
There's a pilgrimage to it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. This is an example of what you have a lot of, I think, in France, and of course probably other countries as well, but outside of the major city, in this case, of course, being Toulouse, you have little villages that have lots of historical things.
Yeah.
And that are very beautiful.
Yeah, and that make for very fun day trips.
Fun day trips because they're literally, it's a half an hour away, you know, and it's all in brick. It's just gorgeous, you know, it's the same material as Toulouse. These are things you can do actually even in a half a day because it's that's close to the city.
Yeah.
So,
do you want to give back to join us in France? Write us a review on iTunes. So for the patrimoine, I went to see the observatory in Toulouse because, this is where I grew up.
Right.
This is the area where I grew up. So for me, it's like so familiar, but I didn't realize a lot of things about this place. It used to be a major observatory 100 years ago. They did major research. They have this Meridian telescope that did star mapping, and they had women who were doing all the calculations.
Really?
And men who were pointing the
telescope?
The telescope, yeah.
Huh.
And they had a group of women. They even have some pictures of the computers. They called them computers. These were women who did
the computing.
Difficult math.
Right.
It's a very, it was very interesting what they were doing there. A lot of the instruments are old and not used anymore, although you could use them. They look fabulous. The whole thing, it still works. They can still open up the domes and look.
I've been there when they have opened up the dome.
Right. They didn't this time because it was cloudy, so there was no point to it. But they have a newer telescope, and they do a lot of photography. So I think I'm going to start going regularly. And they do a lecture on a Friday night once a month.
Once a month, I know.
And so I'll go to that definitely. And
is the lecture on astronomy or on photography?
It could be anything. They invite, because the whole astronomy group moved from Toulouse to the Pic du Midi
because of the air. The air and the site.
Light pollution.
Right.
Light pollution in Toulouse.
Right.
You don't see enough. Pic du Midi is much nicer for that. So they invite professional PhD people to come and give lectures. And mostly it's people from Pic du Midi. Sometimes it's from Paris or other, places. But it sounds like it's a lot of fun. And they have a lot of photography equipment that's meant for star photography. Now, I'm into photography. I've tried to take a few photos and I can do okay. But I don't have what it takes.
Right.
I don't have the equipment. I don't have a telescope that I can put my camera to. They do. And they loan it to people. You can use the stuff and learn from them and all that. So I'm like, I'm so excited.
I knew about the association, and I remember vaguely that they did indeed meet a Friday once a month. So that's very interesting.
They meet much more than that.
Oh, they meet more than that?
Yeah, several times a week.
Ah.
Yeah. You can even do, it's called Astronomie Populaire. Mm-hmm. So if you have a project, you submit it to the group, and they will do everything that they can to assist you achieve your goal. And so they open it up for you at specific times, and they
and the park there is gorgeous anyway.
Yes, it's a beautiful it's
a
big.
promontory.
Yeah,
really.
it's a big place. Anyway, so that was very fun. And
That's fun.
It wasn't my first time going in there because when I was going to school right next door, the school is gone, but it's now a police station.
Ah, that's where your school was.
Yes. And we used to jog. That's where we jogged. So I have bad memories of that place. I didn't like jogging.
Torture.
Even back then. But anyway, I have seen that park, thousands of times I've been there. But it's really fun to go and see the beautiful, the main building is Vitry, it's very
beautiful.
Nice.
Yeah. And of course it's the highest hill in the actual city, right? Mm-hmm. And when you think that when they built that, there was no pollution in the air because there was not that much development.
Oh, yeah.
It was far. It was actually outside of the actual old city.
It totally was. It was like
I
outside
guess
the
even
city.
when you were growing up, it must have been much less developed than it is now.
Much, much less. Yeah. Now it has an underground station and all these, it's got a lot of stuff. So anyway, sorry about that.
But we had a good time.
We digress.
No, but it's really fun because I think it's, for anybody who's thinking of taking a trip to France, know that on the third weekend of September, wherever you are in France, you will have occasion to visit places that are not usually open to the public.
Yes.
Not only the fact that other places like museums basically are all free that weekend, which can cause a bit of a backlog in terms of standing online to see things, but plan your vacation knowing that you have this opportunity.
That's
it's
right.
Really good.
If you want to come to France,
September is a great month anyway to visit France.
The third week of September is a good choice.
It's a good choice.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So, do you want your friends to listen to Join Us in France too? Tell them how you listen to the show. All right, shall we move on to Carla-Bayle?
So let's move on to Carla-Bayle. And
Bayle. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's Bayle or Bayle.
It's Bayle.
I'd have to ask the natives. I don't trust you.
You never trust me.
No, when it comes to French pronunciation.
No, but I know it's Carla-Bayle.
Okay, but you might be. It's possible you are correct.
I've been there many times.
There you go. Unlike me.
Okay. I actually chose to talk about this little village because I was thinking about places that are within an hour's drive of Toulouse. Mm-hmm. And there are quite a few of them, and some of them are really quite lovely. And if somebody is visiting Toulouse or staying in the area and has a car, there are wonderful little discovery trips you can do that aren't just to the very famous places we know about. We've talked about Foix, we've talked about Carcassonne, and we've talked about a lot of the other major tourist attractions. Mm-hmm. But there are, as you know, some unknown ones.
Yep.
And this is one of them, and it's part of an area that's called the Valley of the Lez, Leze, mm-hmm. which is a river.
La Vallée de la Lez.
Vallée de la Lez.
Yep.
There are many small rivers that I don't know if we'd say they lead out of or go into Toulouse. To be honest, I'm not sure which way that works. I think they come from the Pyrenees and empty into the bigger rivers that go into the Garonne. So They probably go up. But in this case, we have is a region with filled with tiny little villages that are quite old, very historical, very beautiful. And they're part of course, the rich history of Toulouse that has to do with going back as far as the Qatar and all of these other things. And because it's still within the region of Toulouse, many of these villages have beautiful churches and some of the buildings made out of brick. So there's a kind of beautiful cachet, there's a look to some of these places. But there's this one place, and this is this one that I wanted to talk about today. It's about 50 kilometers from Toulouse, so it's very close in the sense. South.
Yeah.
South and slightly southeast, but for our purposes, we can just say south.
Yeah.
It is a place that is at the beginning of the foothills of the Pyrenees. Mm-hmm. It's at 400 meters in altitude. So that's already a decent height.
Yeah, Toulouse is mostly at like 20 to 50.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. So obviously what we're talking about is over 1,200 feet in altitude, which is a very nice altitude to be at because it helps the climate, So it's a place where even when it gets very hot during the day in the summertime, it gets a little bit cooler at night. And of course it's relatively rural around there. as you leave Toulouse and go south, there are two roads that take you there. You can actually take a highway and cut across, but the nicest way to do it is to take a road. It turns into the road that's the D9, which is the départemental 9. And you follow the valley of the Lez.
Oh, that would be fun.
And I've done this, I cannot tell you, I think I've probably done this 40 times. And what's nice is that as you do this, you have to have patience. This is not for people who are in a hurry because you go through several villages and there are lights and things like that.
Yeah.
But you actually stop along the way in two other little villages, little by large, I guess by standards of elsewhere.
By New York standards.
By New York standards. That are absolutely gorgeous. And I just wanted to mention them because it's also part of the idea of doing this as an excursion for the day. The first one that you come to, once you've left really the outer suburbs with modern little houses and all of that, you get to a very gorgeous little town called Saint-Sulpice-sur-Lez. And it's the very first of several of these beautiful medieval towns. It's a bastide. It was founded in 1257.
Wow.
By Alphonse de Poitiers, who was the...
Did he get lost? Alphonse de Poitiers. Poitiers is nowhere near here.
No, but we know the story of Alphonse de Poitiers is that he was the king's brother, and he was the one who was forced to marry the Count of Toulouse's daughter when they were both 12 years old.
Well,
you know, when we're talking about political marriages, this is when the Count of Toulouse, after the war with the Qatar, had to renounce his ownership of this entire region, gave it over to the King of France, which was this piddly little kingdom up there, you know, up there in Paris.
Who wants
place
that?
Up there, you know, right? And anyway, Alphonse de Poitiers, it's very interesting because the story of his life and the story of his wife's life is really actually fascinating. But they actually did not officially get married until they were both 16. But he took over basically running this area when the Count of Toulouse was dethroned. And what he did was he followed what was a tradition that had begun by the Count of Toulouse of starting these brand new little towns in the medieval times that were called bastide, which means they were built from scratch with a beautiful covered market as a center of them.
Right.
And he continued this tradition. So there are many, in fact, in the southwest of France that were built under his auspices. So he was kind of a good guy, even though he was forced into this kind of situation. So the town of Saint-Sulpice is all beautiful old houses from the Middle Ages, all made of brick, with a magnificent covered market and a beautiful little church. And it's a great place to stop and just take a walk around for about 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's really pretty. And then you keep on this road, and then you get to a few other villages, and you get to another one called Les Arts-sur-Lez, which is filled with houses. Lezat. Les Arts.
Les Arts, okay.
Yeah. With houses that are also
We'd say Les Arts, wouldn't we? Around here.
You know, I don't know. Sometimes they say les arts, sometimes they say les arts, but I've heard them say les arts. So I really don't know.
I'm going to have to do the typical tourist thing. You go somewhere and you go into the bakery and you say, "Where am I?"
And then listen to them. Except that you can understand the French, so when they say it, you'll understand their answer.
Yes.
And this place, which is also on the same road, is filled with houses that are half-timbered houses from the 14th, 15th, and 16th century. And has another marketplace and a beautiful church made out of brick. So it's really going back in history, and it's a lovely road. And then you get it out into the countryside, and you drive a bit more until you get to a little teeny little thing, a little town that's really tiny called Le Fossat.
Okay.
And there you turn off, you go on a tiny little road that takes you to the right, which basically is turning you south because you've been going southeast. And you get...
So you take a right at Le Fossat?
There's a road that has a sign that says to Carla-Bayle.
Oh, there you go.
And it's the area that's called the Volvestre. That's the region.
Oh.
Now she has a light bulb that just lit up over her head.
I've probably been there because when I was even younger, My parents used to own a place in Sainte-Croix-Volvestre.
Okay. But that is, you get to by taking now the autoroute, which would take you past Muret.
Yes.
This is the extreme eastern edge because you're already in Ariège.
Okay.
So from here.
But it's the Volvestre. It's the same general area.
In other words, the Volvestre, for those of you out there listening to us, is a region that used to have its own viscount that goes back to a long, long history, really from the 1100s and 1200s. That is actually a beautiful area. That's the foothills leading into the Pyrenees. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a very lovely area.
Yeah.
And so this is basically the eastern edge because you're really already by this time in the department of the Ariège.
Right. Yes.
And this gets you, I think it's I don't remember exactly. I didn't look it up to measure it, but it's probably another 10 kilometers, not even. And you get to Carla-Bayle.
Okay. So Carla-Bayle is in Haute-Garonne?
No, it's in Ariège.
C'est dans l'Ariège. Okay.
It's in Ariège. It's in the northwestern tip of Ariège.
Okay.
Okay. And from there, you can take another road that crosses
that's 09.
over.
The zip code starts with 09.
Right. And from there, you can either go back the way you came, or if you want to continue further into Ariège and go to a place that we'll talk about another time, Mas-d'Azil, and the area around there, you can actually cross over the town of Carla-Bayle and take the road that leads out the other side, and it will take you to Mas-d'Azil and then further south into the deeper part of the Ariège.
Okay.
So we're really at the introduction, if you wish.
So how much of a drive between Carla-Bayle and Mas-d'Azil, more or less?
20 to 25 minutes at the most.
Wow, it's pretty close.
It's really close.
Yeah, okay.
It's really close. So the two
Now I definitely have to go.
Now you definitely have to go. And you should go before the weather gets bad because in the winter it does rain a lot in this area.
It's very wet.
Whereas September and October are really beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. So the two reasons I wanted to talk about this village, one is...
Other than make me want to go there.
Is because it is now... right now, and has been for, I'd say, the last 30 years, a major artist colony.
Oh.
It's a town. The actual year-round population is not even quite 1,000 people. It had a lot more people before, but obviously there was a certain exodus towards cities. Now, of course, what is happening is people are moving back in, but it's also a small town that redeveloped around artistic things. So there is a major art festival there that is held in the summertime. It's really an important one. It's not, every village in France has a little something or other going on, but this is really a serious one, not with your just Sunday artists or anything like that.
And when is the festival?
The festival is in July and in August.
Okay.
And besides that, it's a town that's filled with art galleries and a small art museum. So even though it's very small, it obviously is a place that fills up with people, and a lot of the homes in the village have become B&Bs. So it fills up with a lot of people for two reasons. One, because people come because of the art festival and because it's become famous as being a place that has a lot of craft shops and everything. And because you can stay there. And from there, you can travel to a lot of other places and not have to be in the high mountains.
Right.
Now, one of the things I think in one of the photos I think I sent you yesterday.
Yes, which you'll be able to see them on joinusinfrance.com/85.
Right. You have, and this is true. I was there this summer again. You have a view of the valleys that lead to the mountains, and the mountains that is absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, it looks very nice.
It's absolutely gorgeous. And so obviously, if it's a very hot day and there's a low cloud cover, you won't necessarily see very far. But otherwise you will, because physically, this is the way it's laid out. Carla-Bayle is actually on a crest of a cliff. And at 400 meters high, it runs in, it's like a long, narrow village, even though part of it was developed as a bastide with some gridded streets. So like a couple of other medieval villages that still exist in the Southwest, when you drive up to the top, there's a nice little parking area right near this little bit of a monument. And then what you do is you walk, and you basically have 2-3 streets that run very, very long, east-west. And then you have shorter streets that cross going north-south because it runs along this pinnacle that is basically the edge of this cliff. And what happened was the first established record of anybody living in this village was actually in the 10th century. And then in the 11th century, it was turned into a very active commercial center. And in the beginning of the 1200s, this famous Alphonse de Poitiers took over, added ramparts around the outside, and turned it into a bastide. So it became a very important trading center. Interestingly enough, it's hard, I think, for us to imagine how tiny little places that seem to be in the middle of nowhere 800 years ago could be important. Well, I guess it's because the land around it still to this day is very important agricultural land.
Right.
So you have a lot of sunflower, you have a lot of corn, you have a lot of wheat, but you also, this is the beginning of the area that grows pastel.
Aha. Yeah, which was a major business.
Which was a major business. And so this famous pastel, which makes this wonderful blue dye, what happened was that the town of Carla, which at that time was called Carla-le-Comte, named after the Comte Alphonse de Poitiers.
Very nice. Okay.
Isn't that nice?
Yes.
Okay. For several centuries, it was called Carla-le-Comte.
And why did they change the name?
They changed the name because at the time of the French Revolution...
Oh, of course, I knew you were going to say that.
Well, what do you want? You know, I mean, this is what happens. This is France, right?
Yeah.
Right? At the time of the French Revolution, they changed it to Carla-Bayle. And the reason they changed it to Carla-Bayle is because, and it has to do with the other part of the history of this wonderful little town, is that there was a wonderful philosopher, and poet from the 16th century, from the 1500s, who was born there, named Pierre Bayle.
Okay.
And not only was he an important philosopher, but he was a bastion in the Protestant community, because the other part of the history of Carla-Bayle is that it was a very big stronghold of Protestants, of Huguenots, during the 1500s, during the War of Religion. And so what happened was that many, many of the important Huguenot families lived there. Mm-hmm. It was very important. It had several thousand people, actually, in the 16th century. Mm-hmm. And when things got rather bad, and of course a little bit bloody, because we know that there was really basically a civil war between the Protestants and the Catholics, many of the people were forced to leave. And what happened was that Pierre Bayle, who was a brilliant young man, he left to study later on. And strangely enough, I was doing some research about him because it was interesting to know why would the town be named partly after him. Mm-hmm. What happened was that as a young man of about 20, he had left the countryside and gone to study, I guess, in Toulouse. And for a very strange reason, which I guess is not very clear, for a very short time, he converted to Catholicism. Okay. And what happened was he stayed Catholic for not longer than about 2 years.
Oh, that was fast.
And then he renounced the conversion. Okay. Went back to being a Protestant. And it's, I'm making a supposition here because it's very strange because I don't know that much. I was just doing some research about it. But I think it sounds like he wanted to see from the inside exactly what the teachings would be. Because what happened was that when he left and went back to being a Protestant, he started doing a lot of his writing. And he was a poet and he was writing theological treatises and he was a philosopher. And he wrote many things that were very hostile to and accusatory of the Catholic Church. Oh, wow. And so what happened was he was forced to leave France. And he went to Flanders, and then he went to the Netherlands. And he basically spent the rest of his life coming back to France several times. But he was considered to be, like Erasmus, a humanist philosopher with a very open, tolerant attitude towards all kinds of people and different religions. And he wrote all kinds of interesting papers about religious tolerance and how important it was. So interesting. It's very interesting. So what happened was that he is actually famous in certain circles for his writings.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look him up.
And so what happened was this Carla-le-Comte, which during the 1500s, 1600s, obviously was a fairly prosperous, tiny little place. by the time of the French Revolution, it was very revolutionary because this was very often what happened when places had been strongholds of the Huguenots. And it was very much for the revolution. Right. So they changed the name, and then they changed it back after the revolution. They changed it back to Carla-le-Comte. Okay. And then it was not until 1879 that they officially made it Carla-Bayle.
Okay, well.
Which happens a lot, you know.
Yeah. Places changing our names. But this philosopher, Bayle, Pierre Bayle.
Yeah.
When did you say he was alive?
In the 1500s. In the
1500s,
In the 1500s. He was born, if I remember correctly, in 1540 and died at just about 1600 in the Netherlands.
Wow. Because those are the ideals that Voltaire espoused.
That's right.
But that was much
later. A little bit later.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that he was someone who influenced people like Voltaire. Uh-huh. It's interesting to know that there are so many of these people around that we don't know about. Really, when you think about it, because I started reading some of what the summary was of some of the things he wrote, and it really does sound very, very interesting, you know. And of course, this is the moment, I may be wrong about exactly the dates, but I do believe it's pretty much the same time period as Erasmus, who may have been just a little bit later, but I don't think so. I think it was pretty much the same time.
It's very fascinating. When you walk around French cemeteries, they often write, for people who were very notable back in their day, they often write that they were a composer or a philosopher or this, and these are people you've never heard of.
Right.
So I usually take a picture, and then later, when I'm sorting through my pictures, I will look them up briefly. I mean, I don't spend hours on it, but I will see if they have a Wikipedia page and, you know, what they say about them. And it's fascinating. There were interesting people all over France.
Yeah.
Really.
And I think
inventors of all sorts and just people you've never heard of, really.
And I think it was maybe there were a couple of centuries where it was kind of a widespread thing to try to be a very well-educated person. Here, I've just found a bit of a quote that I had found that it said that after the War of Religions, the town itself, which of course at that point after the War of Religions was over, and unfortunately most of the Huguenots or the Protestants actually left and went to other places, you know. But they say that the town itself was considered to be a haven of peaceful coexistence.
Wow.
And it became famous in the region.
We need more of those.
We need more of those, right?
Even today. This episode was helpful to you? Share it with your friends on social media.
Now, the other thing about this town, besides that this is its history, it has many of the beautiful half-timbered houses. It still has a gorgeous rampart that goes 3/4 of the way around it.
Oh, it's still there.
It's still there.
Wow.
And it has remnants of the castle, the Count's Castle. The church is from the 1680s, so by French standards, it's not very old, but of course, it's still a very beautiful church made out of mostly brick. But the other thing is that all of the houses, and partly because this is in a region that grew pastel, and this is probably a recent thing, but it's gorgeous to see, all of the houses, all the shutters and doors are painted blue.
Oh, that's nice.
And it's a beautiful blue. It's this dark, many of them are this dark, rich, vibrant blue. It's absolutely gorgeous. So when you walk through it, especially on a sunny day, it just pops out at you and it gives you a feeling that you're in an artist's colony kind of place, you know, and there are a couple of lovely little restaurants. I don't remember the names of them, but I remember that it was a beautiful place to just hang out. And just a last thing, because I find this so fascinating. There was a movie made in the 1980s in France with Depardieu, Gérard Depardieu, who of course is very, very famous.
Yeah.
And Nathalie Baye.
Yes.
And the movie was called The Return of Martin Guerre.
Oh yeah, Le Retour de Martin Guerre.
Well, it was filmed there.
Oh, it was.
It was.
Oh, so I have seen the place through the movie, but it was a long time ago.
And the reason why it was filmed there is because it's based on of course, you know, it's a true story.
Yes.
And we can summarize it by saying that it takes place in the 1500s. And it is the story of one man who actually takes the identity of another, a man who has been married and disappears. And 8 years later, another man
He goes
shows
to
up.
war, right?
Well, that's in the movie, but I spent a lot more time reading about the real story of Martin Guerre than I did actually about Pierre Bayle, because I thought it was really kind of interesting. It's a lot more complicated than that. They don't know what he did. He disappeared.
Okay.
He disappeared. And this other man, who they eventually figured out who it was, comes back and takes his place next to his supposed widow and lives with her for over 3 years, has 2 children with her. And then eventually the man who is supposed to be the real man shows up with one leg missing and says, this man has usurped my identity, taken over my wife and my property, and eventually is accused and found guilty and is hanged.
Which one is hanged?
The second one, the imposter.
The imposter is hanged.
But he's obviously been living with this woman with her total complicity, because she knows very well that he isn't really her husband.
You would know, wouldn't you?
You would know.
I mean...
Especially if you've had 2 kids together.
Yeah,
it's like, I think so. Even in those days.
Yeah, they weren't dumb, were they?
They weren't dumb. No. But it's a fascinating story, and it's apparently a story in terms of jurisprudence that had an effect on law afterwards, because it has to do with the whole idea of usurpation of identity and taking over a property. And if you go online and read about it, you discover that it was a real viper's nest, because it had to do with inheritance of property. And it was the in-laws who sided with the second guy against the first guy. I mean, it was a whole big thing. But of course, they turned it into this really wonderful.
The movie's good.
It's a wonderful movie.
Yeah.
It's absolutely a wonderful movie.
I'll see if you can stream it on Netflix or on Amazon or something.
Apparently, there was an American remake with Jodie Foster and Richard Gere called Sommersby.
Oh.
Which is apparently using the same story, but set in England or New England, something like that. But it's not nearly as good. It doesn't matter. This is wonderful. And the movie was filmed in Carla-Bayle and the area, because the actual story took place in a town that's about 3 or 4 kilometers away called Artigat. And that's really where this family had lived in the 1500s. Only now there is nothing left of the beautiful old medieval city that it was, with the farmland around it. So they shot most of the building scenes and the farm structure scenes in the town of Carla-Bayle.
And that movie gives you a really good impression of what it was like to live, the costumes, the houses, the dirt roads.
Right.
It's just, and the fact that they didn't have medical, they didn't have very good doctors.
No.
A lot of people were crippled or unhealthy, and they really didn't glamour it up at all.
No, they didn't.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of those, maybe it was because
Nathalie Mbaye is usually a gorgeous woman, but
it's very interesting, because when I saw that it was made in 1982, I guess I had seen it. I didn't see it in the movies, so I guess I had seen it on television, or I had rented it. I don't remember which, but it actually startled me to realize that the movie was over 30 years old.
Yes, it's an old movie, but it's good.
They were both very young at the time, obviously.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful movie, and you're absolutely right. It gives a very accurate idea of what life was like and what thinking was like at the time.
And you see there's a scene at the end where they talk to the Comte de Toulouse.
Yes.
And I don't remember if they come to Toulouse to be...
That's where the trial is.
Okay, that's where the trial is.
Yes, that's where the trial is.
It's been so long. I have to watch it again.
And it's really a movie that gives you an idea also of what law was like at the time. I mean, just about everything. So
it was a mess. Back then, every little county, every little place had its own laws. None of the laws were centralized. And, Americans are very enamored of this idea of being independent and doing your own thing. Like, you have to, teach your kids. Like, you have to have a local school district and a local... Well, when it comes to law, you don't want it too local. Otherwise, it's a huge mess.
No, it was a huge mess. And, of course, that was one of the things that did get unified later on. But this takes place in the 1560s. That's exactly when it is. It's the 1560s. So it's really the moment when... And this is the other thing that makes it interesting, is that it's in the 1500s, in the middle of the 16th century, that the War of Religion takes place, and that... Carla-Bayle is considered to be a town of a lot of tolerance until the Huguenots get kicked out, which of course is in the 1570s.
Yeah.
But
that would not be friendly. Yeah.
And the place is gorgeous. The town is beautiful. It's not the most spectacular you'll see, but it's the place where it is beautiful, and
it's
history.
Real, and it's real France.
And it's real France.
There will not be busloads of tourists from anywhere.
No.
If you go, you'll be driving your little. Either you can drive yourself, or you can hire Elise to take you, and she'll take you.
I'll take you there.
And
take you there.
Yeah, and you might be the only tourist there that day.
You might be.
It's not a touristy place,
except for the art festival, which of course makes it very popular.
Yes,
but it's wonderful too if you're someone who's really interested in seeing.
So is it like edgy art?
It's a little bit of both, which is why I like it, because it's not just kind of what I call Sunday painters who do imitation landscape, blah 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 blah. It's actually got some famous. There are different parts of the art fair because it pretty much lasts all summer. Mm-hmm. But there is a period of time of about 2-3 weeks when it is more edgy contemporary work. And then they have the galleries that have other artists who actually work there and sell a lot all the time. Mm-hmm. But it's a chance to see things that are in a very exceptional setting.
Right.
And from there, again, you have not only a spectacular view of the mountains, but you can even go hiking. There are trails where you can actually hike down below.
Oh, sure.
Because it's up above, and you can go down towards the rivers, because it's really in between the Lez and then another one called the Ariège.
Okay.
And the Ariège is the one that takes us further in, takes us to this famous Mas d'Azil and all the rest.
I wonder if they have canoeing and things like that.
I don't know.
I'll look. If I find some, I'll put it on the website.
Carla-Bayle has a lake.
Okay.
But I believe it's an artificial lake.
Yeah.
They probably have some kayaking on the lake. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, to be honest, at that point, I know more what the Ariège looks like in that area than what the Lez actually looks like in terms of a river, because the Ariège, you cross several times when you take the back roads to go into that area. Whereas the Lez, you don't really see that much, actually, So I'm not even sure. But there's a lot of summer sports in the area. There's a lot of water sports because there are the rivers and there are a couple of lakes, and lots of good place for some biking and hiking as well.
So about the art, is it mostly painting?
Mostly painting.
Okay.
Mostly painting. From what I could see of what just happened this past summer, there's obviously a little bit of other stuff, but it is, I would say, largely painting and work that's not full sculpture or things like that,
Do they have a ton of people who do their own crafty jewelry?
Yes. And there's leather. There's a lot of leather. There's leather goods. It's not as big and not as famous for its crafts as a place like Cordes-sur-Ciel. Mm-hmm. But yes, there are people who have their own craft shops there, and it's become very famous for that as well. So I know that there's leather and there's some jewelry. And
that's another place we haven't talked about. We haven't done an episode on Cordes-sur-Ciel.
We have.
We have not.
We have not. Yes, we have.
No, we have not.
We'll have to check.
I'll check. I don't think we have.
Okay.
We need one.
Then we need one right away.
Yes.
But meanwhile.
And you made promises about Brittany too.
Yes, I did. Yes. I did. And I said that we'll take a section because we can't take all of it because it's like talking about a country.
Yeah, it's big. Yeah. Well, big.
It's big. Otherwise it becomes too generic, let's say.
Yeah.
So just, as closure for this, I really strongly recommend, if you come and stay in Toulouse, you can stay in Toulouse for several days. I accompanied 3 people for a visit in Toulouse this summer who did something that I think is a great thing to do. They did a house exchange. They had a house in Toulouse for about 10 days, and they had a car, and they did day trips, and they went in every single direction, and I gave them an itinerary for a day's trip in the Gers. I could have gone with them, but it was a moment when I would not have been able to. But otherwise, I set them up for a really nice day's excursion in that direction. And you can pretty much stay in Toulouse, visit Toulouse, which is worth a lot more than just an afternoon.
Yeah.
And then have wonderful little day trips like this, going to this place, Carla-Bayle, in this area. You have a great day out.
I think that's a really good way to do things. I'm very inclined to do that because okay, Airbnb, I know I have spoken very favorably about Airbnb, but this last summer when we were in Philadelphia, I looked for an Airbnb and everything that was still available was outrageously expensive. You could stay, well, a long way away from the center and still pay $200 a night.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, for that, I'll go to a hotel and I'll be right downtown.
Right.
You know, so I think the whole home exchange thing, and I'm looking into a few companies that do it because I think I would enjoy that.
It's good when
we've done it with people we've known.
Right.
It's been perfect because you show up. If you arrange it that way, you can exchange cars.
Right.
You know, they can take care of your cat or whatever if you have pets. Perfect. I would love that. I need to do more of that.
It's good. And of course, what I had said to this, they were very nice. I said, oh, it's so nice to have people who are staying for more than just 24 hours or 36 hours in Toulouse.
Yeah.
And they said it was wonderful. It was one of the best surprises they ever had. That wasn't where they originally thought they would land at. And that's where they are, and they were happy that they were there.
It's more genuine friends. I mean, everything around Toulouse, it's not made for tourists. It's just how we really live. You know, there's very little that's, I mean, and as a matter of fact, I bet that's one of the problems that Toulouse has is when people look at it on paper, if they go to TripAdvisor or something, well, they don't see any huge attractions. I mean, they see
well, they do what I do with so many people, the 2.5 hours of the major monuments of Toulouse. And then everyone always says to me, I didn't think Toulouse would be so beautiful. I didn't think there would be that much to see. So it's a curse and a blessing at the same time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we do have we have the Cité de l'Espace. Okay. For people who want to visit something formal, you know, like, but that's for kids. That's for, and you can also do an Airbus visit, which is very good, but there isn't anything that screams, you know, you must come to Toulouse and see these. It's in a lot of little things. It's a lot of, you know, it all piles up to a very nice experience.
Well, because it's the charm of the southwest of France.
Yes. And when you put the good food and the good wine in with it, well, then, it makes for a good vacation.
It certainly does.
Do you know somebody who's interested in France? Kidnap them and make them listen to all the episodes all at once. Just kidding. Don't do that. But you could tell them about the show. All right. Well, thank you so much, Elise.
You are welcome.
I was very worried that this month I wouldn't grab you. Because you were a little difficult to get a hold of.
Yeah, well, I wasn't around that much, but I'm good. We're good for the next couple of months.
Oh, good. Excellent. All right. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you next week. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
This brings us to the end of another Join Us in France travel podcast. You can leave a comment on the website, follow us on Facebook, or look for @ParisPodcast on Twitter. I put lots of information on Facebook and Twitter that never makes it into the shows. And also, this is a subliminal message. Join the mailing list. Now, today. You can do that on joinusinfriends.com. Look for the green button. Et c'est tout pour aujourd'hui.